Hello, everyone. We're so excited to have you here with us today. We're going to be looking at supporting English language learners across the disciplines. And to kick things off, we're going to switch over to our slide share. But before we do, we're just going to quickly say our names so you know who you're speaking with. Go ahead.
Hello, everybody. My name is Lily Wan, and I'm a third-year doctoral student at NC State University. And my major is teacher education and learning sciences.
Woo-hoo. And I'm Marie Himes. I'm a research associate here at the Friday Institute and part of the New Literacies Collaborative, which is who is bringing you this webinar today.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Gambino. I'm a second-year doctoral student at the University of California, Los Angeles, and I'm also an NC State graduate and public school teacher from North Carolina.
All right, here we go. Okay. So We're All Language Teachers is focusing on supporting students' language content and analytical learning across the disciplines. And you've already met some of us. In addition to Lily, Andrea, and me, Dr. Hiller Spires is the head of the New Literacies Collaborative, as well as the executive director of the Friday Institute. Our workshop today, our webinar today, is in partnership with Suzhou North America High School, the New Literacies Collaborative, NC State's College of Education, the Friday Institute for Educational Innovation, and East West Ed. If you're interested in learning more about our work here in the New Literacies Collaborative, please follow us on Facebook and Twitter.
All right, thank you, Marie. So today we're here for multiple reasons. Today we're going to talk with you a little bit about how we can provide context for why cross-disciplinary support for English language learners, you might hear us refer to that as ELL, why that is needed. We're also going to introduce the theory that informs quality teaching for English learners, also known as QTEL. And we'll also model research-based instructional practices that support ELL's literacy and language growth, strategies that you can use in your classroom right away. So we will be going through, you've already heard who we are, and you'll get more of that throughout this webinar. You know why we are all here with you. Next, we're going to talk with you a little bit about the world is changing. Are our schools? What is quality teaching for English learning, QTEL? Quality teaching for English learners, social and emotional learning, brought to you by Lily. And then we'll wrap up and celebrate your success. So the world is changing, but are our schools? So there are many competencies that students need to have within the 21st century. And these are broken down and agreed upon by Dr. Hiller Spires, director of the Friday Institute, amongst a litany of other scholars. So these competencies include being globally competent, having STEM and STEAM knowledge, so science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. STEAM adds in that arts component. Students need to be creative problem solvers and critical thinkers, and we also know that students need to be effective communicators and they need to be able to collaborate. So as the world continues to change, if we're looking at this historically, if we're looking at the early 1900s, we know that 5% of jobs needed specialized knowledge and skills. So usually something that they would use within a very specific job or field in order to make a living. If we jump forward and we think about 2019, 70% of jobs require specialized knowledge and skills. And if we look at this over the range of the 80s to 2015, 83% increase in jobs needing critical thinking and soft skills. So we're talking about specialized skills that students might need in a field, but we're also talking about soft skills too. How are students able to be ready to communicate on the job, work collaboratively, and be able to understand one another on a human level, as well as applying the skills that they may have acquired, whether it be in school or informally as well. And that's coming to us from Darling Hammond and Oakes. So with the world changing, are our schools, are we preparing our students to be ready to be career and college ready and ready for their interpersonal lives? So the challenges of a rapidly changing economy are made more complex by global migration, highly visible inequalities, and the increasingly dramatic effects of phenomena like climate change and ever more world-threatening conflicts. So we know that school and education are inextricably tied with demands from the economy. How can we help our students become ready to perform well in the workforce, in their job, in their personal lives? So this calls for a need for 21st century skills and competencies. So 21st century communities and citizens need to forge constructive democratic relationships and fair resource sharing strategies in a shrinking and interdependent world. So thus, as teachers, it's our job to help students be prepared to be able to be just ready to thrive in this interconnected society. So they need those technical skills, skills of innovation, creativity, and skills to be collaborative and effective communicators. So with that being said, here are some more details about 21st century skills. We break this down coming to us from the National Research Council, and these are defined in 3 areas. Students have or should have cognitive, intrapersonal, and interpersonal skills. So we're really trying to think of ways that we can make sure that these are really connected in students' minds and they can see the interrelatability. So for cognitive, that would be students' critical thinking skills, information literacy, reasoning and argumentation, and their ability to innovate and create. Intrapersonal relates to their ability to be flexible, to take initiative, to self-advocate for their learning. Students should appreciate and embrace diversity, remembering that students will need to be able to forge collaborative relationships and personal relationships with people outside of their own background. Also, metacognition, interpersonal communication, collaboration, responsibility, and conflict resolution. So as we can see, all these skills will be utilized both within and externally from school.
So one of the really exciting things for young people is that as we are embarking on this 21st century, their life as adults will require that they have much more than just basic academics knowledge and skills. In terms of personally, adults will have to be able to navigate multiple identities, confront really complex questions, and make informed decisions in the face of uncertainty. In the civic front, so in terms of their community, they will need to be able to articulate and advocate for their own perspective, but also be able to engage in productive dialogue across multiple ideologies. They'll also need to make a tough decision across imperfect options. And professionally, so in the workforce, they'll need to tackle open-ended problems. They'll have to be critical, creative, and collaborative, and engage in ongoing learning. So they're going to have to know how to keep learning because they have to continue to adapt to a rapidly changing economic situation. So right now, we're going to hopefully make this webinar a bit interactive. And so if you are doing this in live time with your colleagues, we ask that you turn and talk with one another about the following question. Which of the aforementioned 21st century skills do English learners already have experience with and expertise in? Because one of the important tenets of quality teaching for English learners from West Ed's perspective is that being an English learner should not be looked at as a deficit. That English learners come to the table with a lot of competencies and perhaps more so than native English speakers in terms of these 21st century skills. So stop the video for a second, talk with your colleagues who are doing this webinar with you, and we'll come back in 1 minute. Welcome back. We're so excited that you're continuing on this journey with us. And so now I wanted to turn to Lily and Andrea and ask them about the 21st century skills that they have found English learners to already have experience and expertise in. So Lily, what do you think?
Yeah, definitely. I'm thinking like as an English teacher, we can actually support students through activating their prior knowledge. For example, if you are a math teacher and you are teaching, let's say this unit is about probability, and you can relate this knowledge with students' real life experiences. For example, recently China is having a very hot. It's not having. It was very hot like last year or this the first half of this year. So it's there's a TV show called 101 Produce 101 China, and so you can ask, hey guys, you know that there are more than maybe 1,000 candidates participating in this program, and there was one person named Yang Chaoyue, and you can ask them, what is the possibility that this girl can win the top three places, so that so that you can motivate them in a very authentic way. And how about you, Andrea?
Thanks for sharing that, Lily. I really appreciate how that models collaborative communication in your classroom. And I think that's such an important 21st century learning skill. I think also, too, English language learners are bringing in so much information about the ways that they communicate online through social media. So to me, I really see that cognitive component in the classroom of how they're bringing their social media use and their skills to engage with research, internet-based research. And then additionally, their intrapersonal, their flexibility is incredible. The ability to learn in multiple languages, communicate in multiple languages. So the skill sets that English language learners bring to the table are limitless.
Yeah, so it sounds like from our end, we are really interested in the interpersonal and intrapersonal skills that English learners bring to the table and how they could contribute in a classroom environment in those areas as experts. Okay, so quality teaching for English learning. This is an initiative that comes from West Ed, and I have had the opportunity to attend multiple summer institutes with West Ed and the QTEL program and have found it incredibly valuable for my professional and personal growth. And so I would definitely recommend the QTEL Summer Institute training, as well as their 3 major texts that have come out of this approach to English learning. If you're really interested in a deep dive into supporting English learners in the 21st century, these 3 books are a great place to start. So with QTEL, they have a lesson format called a lesson in 3 moments, and it's designed to prepare, interact, and extend the knowledge of the learner. And so our training in this segment is going to model a lesson in 3 moments with you all. And so you're going to be expected to participate, and hopefully you're working with colleagues so that this is a collaborative participatory effort. So the preparing the learner phase of a lesson in 3 moments is where you would activate prior and relevant knowledge. You're going to focus students' attentions on the concepts that you're going to be developing and introducing vocabulary, but it's really important that you're selective about what vocabulary to introduce at this point and that you're introducing it in an authentic context. During the interacting phase, this is where your students are really digging into a text or a concept. And so we use that term text very loosely. You're going to deconstruct that concept, and then you're going to bring it back and make connections from that concept within your discipline and hopefully across real life experiences to make it relevant for your students. Finally, extending the understanding. This is where you're going to connect the concept that you have been studying in your instruction to ideas outside of your text or your focal area. And then students need to be able to apply this newly gained knowledge to novel situations and problem solving. And this is really important for English learners across the curriculum, across the disciplines, because learning a language needs to be proleptic, meaning that students have to take what they're learning in terms of language and be able to readily apply it in novel situations in their own lives. So the activity that we're going to kick off with is a novel ideas only. And for this activity, you need to get out a piece of paper. And I would recommend working in a group of 3 to 5 people. You are going to all copy down what you see in the next slide. And in this small group, take 1 minute to brainstorm and jot down together possible responses to the question posed. This is a really great activity to do before, during, or after a lesson. So during that prepare, interact, or extension phase. Today we're doing it during our prepare phase. And our purpose today for this is to get you guys to surface what you already are doing to support English language learning in your discipline. So the key here for language development and apprenticing your students into language development is that group members need to have exactly the same information on their paper. So copy down on your paper the question here, which is what effective strategies, approaches, and activities do you use in your classroom to support English language learning? And then the beginning statement stem to support English language learning in our classrooms, we use. And as you work with your small group, each person surfaces a strategy that they're using round robin style around the group, and everybody in the group writes down what that person shares. So for example, if I say to support English language learning in our classrooms, I use graphic organizers, which serve as a schema building tool with my students, then Lily and Andrea would both write down on their paper graphic organizers to support schema building with students. Okay, so now we're going to model it a little bit for you with that one example, and Lily's going to share what she uses with her students.
So I'm thinking about maybe in my classroom, I'm gonna use a different assessment method. For example, instead of very nervous, high stakes, standardized test, I'm gonna use a portfolio in which that students they can pick up the best work of their daily tasks so that they put them together. And as a teacher, you can review those portfolios, and then you can see the progress and development pace of your students.
Nice. So Lily would write down using a portfolio as a formative and summative assessment with students. Mm-hmm. What about you, Andrea?
To support English language learning in my classroom, I really like to use multimodal text. So for example, if I'm teaching the book, The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald, I might have an excerpt from the printed text, and then I would pair that with some images that would help activate some of the students' prior knowledge that we may have studied formerly, as well as to help develop historical context. So images from the 1920s.
Mm-hmm. And as classroom teachers working with English learners, we know that you bring a wealth of experience and strategies that you already use in your classrooms. So we want to make sure to kick off the interactive portion of this webinar with you guys sharing those with us. Okay, stop the video here. Do your novels idea only in your group, and we'll be back with you in a minute. Welcome back.
And we're back.
So with your novel ideas only now, however many strategies that you guys surfaced, I want you to draw a line under that last strategy in your group. And what you're going to do now is that everybody in the room is going to stand up. Each team is going to share what strategies they have written down, and someone at the front of the room is going to then oh, go ahead, Lily.
Okay. I'm sorry, guys.
That's okay. It's real world here. Then someone at the front of the room is going to be responsible for compiling the full list of everyone in the room. But each individual team is only going to share novel ideas. So that means that if your group's idea strategy was shared by another group, then just make a note beside it that your group, when it's your turn to share, doesn't need to share that. So as the other groups are sharing, you're going to be actively listening. When your group is done sharing in a round robin style, because everybody in your group should have the exact same thing written on their paper, your group sits down. After your group has sat down, then while you're actively listening to all the novel ideas only that are being shared, you're writing those down under the line on your paper and adding the collective ideas to your own novel ideas. So now that you guys have done that, hopefully, you are going to have a moment to stop the video and finish the collaborative sharing out, and we're going to be back with you and move on to another preparing activity. All right, the next activity that we have about preparing the learner is an extended anticipatory guide, and Andrea is going to walk you through this.
So as we were talking about before, English language learners bring in numerous skills, one of which has to do with their prior knowledge. So you should have a handout that's an extended anticipatory guide that you can take a look at right now. And that first piece is going to ask you to complete with a partner the opinion column of this guide. This is a great way to help you interface with some of the material, themes, and some of the subtopics that might be emerging from your lesson of study. So this is great to use with your students to really help get them started before you get into the rest of the during lesson material. So also, it's important to note, if you look at the bottom of the anticipatory set guide, you will see a dyad share formulaic expressions. It's basically sentence stems that can help construct the conversation that your students might be having as they're developing and expressing their ideas, in this case, their opinion. So for example, if we want to go ahead and take a look at that guide, if we're looking at the left-hand side, look at number 1 with me. Number 1 is asking us if we agree or disagree with this concept. Learning is primarily a social and cultural rather than individual phenomenon. Tough to make that decision, right? But that's what we're going to do. So with a partner, please go ahead and decide if you agree or disagree with that statement, and go ahead and work your way through the following statements, but only complete the opinion column so far. So if you'll take a moment, as you might be working on this in real time, pause the video so you can go ahead and have those conversations. And we're back. All right, so now that you've kind of started to interface, those are really, really tough and challenging and complex, open-ended things to discuss, right? So it's great because it really sparks intrigue and helps you really interface together with some of these ideas. We'll revisit the rest of this anticipatory guide during a later portion of this webinar and during this lesson.
Yeah, so feel free to leave that anticipatory guide out during this next section, because we're moving into the interact phase of our lesson, and our text today is coming in the form of slides. So we're kind of summarizing for you all what QTEL is and where it comes from, and then specifically the scaffolding and support that are in line with the QTEL approach. So you're welcome to keep that extended anticipatory guide out as a reminder of the key ideas of QTEL and what we will be revisiting later when you provide evidence and your findings for those statements. So QTEL, how do English learners learn? That is really based in the sociocultural and ecological learning perspectives, and that means that from this perspective, language development emerges from social interaction, which to me is pretty apparent. I mean, why do we learn a language? To communicate. So language development is a consequence of, not a prerequisite for learning. So with quality learning, you have to really deliberately and contingently scaffold students' instruction. And we're going to dig more deeply into what those scaffolds can look like in a little bit. In school, quality learning has to focus on generative and substantive disciplinary practices. So the language that students need to learn and be able to communicate with in a math class will look somewhat similar to what they'll need in an English class, but there will also be really important disciplinary, conceptual, analytical, and language practices that need to be taught within that discipline. So I just actually kind of jumped ahead here because English learners have to develop conceptual, analytic, and language practices simultaneously. And that's why it's so important for disciplinary content experts to be working with students across these three practices in their own classrooms. When it comes to the development of language practices, you have to focus on contextual, contingent, and supportive ways to provide quality learning opportunities for English learners. And the examples that we'll be giving you throughout this lesson and the models that we're providing are those contextual, contingent, and supportive ways. So contextual means what's happening in the classroom, what's the goal of the lesson. Contingent means that, yes, you can be intentional about planning ahead of time during each phase of a lesson, but you also have to understand how to provide students with in-the-moment support for a point of entry into learning. And of course, those have to be supportive, but supportive in a sense that over time allows students to become more and more autonomous. The conditions for QTEL, there are 6 of them. You have to make sure that the way that you are teaching allows for academic rigor, so you're not, colloquially we say here, dumbing down the curriculum for English language learners to take part in it, to have access to it. You need to make sure that you have high expectations for English learners, and that to learn, students are not islands. They're engaging in quality interactions with their peers, with their teachers, with their parents, with the community of learners that they have access to. And you need to, as a teacher, guide their language focus, or excuse me, guide their learning focus to language, metacognitive processes, and create a quality curriculum for them to engage with. So these 6 conditions have to be met for education in 2 or more languages to definitely be better. And this comes from Wolfgang van Leer. So with the QTEL approach, you have to really look at language as offering deep and generative opportunities for action with English learners. I mentioned before that understanding language learning as proleptic is really important. That means that you're not just teaching students an esoteric term for a multiple choice test, but you're teaching them a concept, a way of thinking, a way of learning, a way of communicating, so that when they go outside of your classroom, they will be able to navigate their job and their personal life in a really effective way. Within this process, students are being apprenticed into acting in and on the world. And so to apprentice them in a successful way, you have to make sure that they're engaging in well-constructed and supportive activities. And that means that students are really doing things. They're not, you're not so focused on making sure that when they are doing that, those interactions are absolutely perfect. So when they're speaking with one another, when they're communicating, you're definitely modeling and setting them up for success in terms of their language practice, but you're also not going to be standing over them correcting every single piece of their grammar while doing so. And scaffolding has to be really deliberate and contingent, which means that it has to kind of be scaled with the students as their apprenticeship into the language and the conceptual practices of a discipline begin to develop. So that means there are macro, meso, and micro levels of scaffolding. So micro level might be in your classroom, how you are setting up an activity for engagement with a small group. The meso level might be setting up students for success across multiple disciplines, and that means that you might be using the same types of instructional activities across multiple disciplines so that students no longer have to attend to the structure of the activity itself, but can rather attend to utilizing their disciplinary knowledge within that activity. And at the macro level, that would be across the school. So if it's important for your students to become fluent in English, then your school might need to honor the student's native language, but also perhaps all school communication should be done in both the student's native language and in English. And so that way you're apprenticing and modeling at the school level what you want your students to be able to do when they graduate. We mentioned previously that disciplinary practices entail the simultaneous development of conceptual, analytical, and language. And so this slide digs a bit more into what we mean by those three chunks. Conceptual practices mean that every discipline has key and interconnected ideas, but not only every discipline, also across disciplines, there are key and interconnected ideas. So as a teacher, it's our responsibility to make sure that students understand those conceptual practices within our discipline, but also see how they connect across disciplines. Analytical practices, obviously this comes into play with conceptual. That's where you're comparing diverse points of view, augmenting and hypothesizing. So you're taught something and then you're expected to apply it in novel situations or analyze it from a different perspective. Language practices, this is when you're looking at the purpose and organization of text and making evaluations of preferred language. So there are academic languages, there are disciplinary specific languages. If I walked into a science class and started talking about global warming, maybe that particular terminology is accepted in popular culture, but maybe there's a different term like climate change that might be more acceptable in science.
So now we want to revisit something that Marie was talking with us a bit before about, scaffolding. So Marie mentioned that scaffolding is very strategic when we are apprenticing our students into language learning. So scaffolding is a dynamic and situated act that is responsive to a particular set of circumstances in a particular classroom context. It manifests in multiple ways. When teachers plan what to do in a classroom with specific students to ripen their potential. So how do we guide students along the way, and how do we create those ritual strategies in order to apprentice them to be able to attain a task or a goal or a concept? And then when they act contingently in a class to support the development of new skills or understandings. So the ultimate goal with scaffolding is to create and support student and learner autonomy. So these structures really help facilitate student interaction. And there are 6 different types of scaffolding that have been identified by QTEL. As I go through these next slides and talk with you about each of these types of scaffolding, we would love for you to use a graphic organizer that's provided for you. You should see it. It's called 6 Types of Scaffolding, Note Taker 1. So feel free to complete that as we're going through and talking about these, but also while I'm defining and describing these and providing some of my own personal examples, once again, you're coming in with just so many skills and things that you're already doing in your classroom to support scaffolding. So if you wouldn't mind writing down your own examples as well on that graphic organizer. So first, we're going to go ahead and talk about modeling. So modeling as a scaffold technique is when we as teachers are providing clear examples of what is expected for students. So for example, if I'm working with my students on writing topic sentences for a body paragraph, it would be really important that I provide a guided example or sentence frame for students, and I can show them the technique to create a topic sentence. I might also use, as a piece of that scaffold, a color coding technique that matches with different words or parts of speech that can then help students. I can apprentice them as they begin to construct their own topic sentence. So students will see me model this for them, and then they will go and complete that task independently or collaboratively. Okay, so that would be modeling. Next type of scaffolding is text representation. So this would be when students are transforming or synthesizing linguistic constructions from one genre to another. All right, so they might do this visually. They might take one thing that they know and then make it look differently. So this might include some different options. So for example, if I'm asking students to, say, refer back to that topic sentence that they just created in a verbal or written form, I might ask them if they could draw for me the main theme or argument or topic that they would talk about within that full body paragraph that's mentioned. So how can they convert what they've just written into another medium? So perhaps drawing could be one way that they could do that. All right. Our third type of scaffolding comes to us in thinking about metacognitive development. So when we're talking about meta, how are students thinking about that thinking? All right, so what's that additional level? How can we help students toward autonomous reflection? And how can we monitor that learning and performance? So remember, if our goal is to increase student and learner autonomy, then we want to make sure that they are able to process through what they know and what they've learned. So a great way that they could do that is by discussing something that they've just learned, a technique or something, a text representation that they've just created. And how can they express that they understand? That might be with you as their teacher, orally or written. It might also be in a collaborative group. It might also be through a think, pair, share with just one other person. All of these could be ways that students could express what it is that they've learned. And it also helps build student confidence about their learner autonomy. Next, and Marie mentioned schema building, I believe, a little bit before. So schema building is when we can help our students identify and organize clusters of concepts that are interconnected. So right here, we see a graphic organizer and visual representation in the bottom left-hand side. So this can be wildly useful for students. So graphic organizers can certainly help students to map out conceptually things that they've learned. One way that I might do this with my students is, let's say that I am working with students in a science class about the scientific method and a mini project that they're working on. I might have a graphic organizer that has the steps of the scientific method, and then I might ask students to write and or draw pieces that relate to their own science project that they might be working on. Okay. And then lastly, we want to think about contextualization. So this is incredibly important for when we're embedding academic language and concepts in a sensory environment. So remember, within your discipline, there's very specific language and vocabulary, but as students are being apprenticed into language, it is extremely helpful if we can help tie what they're learning to context. So we might be doing that with videos and multimodal text. We might be doing that with visuals. So for example, if in my history classroom, we're studying a unit on industrialization, that would come with its own set of vocabulary. So I might co-construct with students a word wall of discipline-specific vocabulary, as well as images that can help increase that context for students about what we're reading, writing, and speaking about. Next, we have bridging. So once again, activating students' prior knowledge, recognizing everything that English language learners bring to the table. So we want to activate prior knowledge, and then we want to do that in order to build upon it. So we want to help bridge that. You know, what do students already know? How can we connect that to something new that we're learning about? So for example, if students know what a hypothesis is in their, say, science project, then how can we then link that to something new by perhaps reading an excerpt from a case study on another subject matter related to that topic? How can we help students think about what it is that they already know? How can they look at it in a different way, perhaps by something that someone else has created? How can they link those things together? It's those aha moments. And it also helps increase learner autonomy, honors what they know, and helps students continue to engage on that learning continuum to see that there are new ways that they can connect what they know to something new.
And when we talk about learner retention, we know that it's really, really important to connect students' already existing knowledge and already existing schema to new concepts, because that helps them in proleptic situations in the future be able to call upon those concepts and interconnected ideas and share them in a novel situation. So the graphic organizer that you guys have all been completing while listening to Andrea speak about the 6 types of scaffolding is a really great model of multiple types of scaffolding. And that's what's really cool about the instructional activities that are all a part of the QTEL approach, is that they don't really offer just like one type of student support. The graphic organizer that you're doing is helping you build schema, in that it's helping you understand the 6 different types of scaffolding and what their definitions are, but then it's also helping you bridge to the prior knowledge that you're bringing to the table, because the expectation was that you're supposed to provide an example from your discipline on your graphic organizer. So that was our interact phase. We are moving on to our extension phase, and this is where you guys get to apply all of this wonderful knowledge to novel scenarios, to your own lives, and learn more, a little bit more independently or less prescribed than what the first 2 phases allowed for. So right now, what we are going to recommend that you do is pull out your 6 types of scaffolding note taker 2 and watch the video on YouTube that is provided in the notes on this slide. And through that video, you are going to get to observe a classroom and in real time jot down some notes about how this instructor is utilizing the 6 types of scaffolding. So pause the video here. Take a few minutes to do that individually or as a collaborative group. And once you have done that, we'll rejoin our webinar and move on to, I believe, the extended anticipatory guide. Okay. So the extended anticipatory guide.
And we're back. All right. So we want you to revisit the extended anticipatory guide that we were talking about before. Originally, you were working with partners. You were considering your opinions, whether you agree or disagree on different concepts that have been featured in this webinar. So it also may have been the case that during this webinar today that you kept that anticipatory guide out and you may have added a few things, or you may not have gotten the chance to. Either is okay. We want you to revisit that. Now look at the middle column. It should say finding. Okay, so we want you to look at the findings column. And also additionally, remember, we have the dyad share formulaic expressions that can help really kind of structure or guide your conversations. And basically, we also want you to take a look at the evidence column, because we want you to be able to ground your different findings that you've experienced thus far in this webinar. And we want you to do that using evidence-based phrases and words, using only evidence from the session's text, and also class discussions that you may have had with your colleagues and peers today. So, for example, earlier we were looking at number 1. You were asked to agree or disagree. I got it. About learning is primarily a social and cultural rather than individual phenomenon. So now if you're taking a look at that, look at the column beside that. And so we see finding, we're asking you to agree or disagree once more. It might be the case that you have shifted your original answer, okay? And then we want you to use evidence from today's session and class discussion to be able to explain using your own words what you've learned, okay? Once more noting that this is a scaffolding technique that can activate prior knowledge with your own students. So this, or something, a variation of this graphic organizer could be used in your classroom. So please pause the video to take a few moments to do that.
All right, we're back again. Our final extension activity today, before we turn it over to Lily and learn a bit more about socio-emotional learning with English learners, is the clothesline activity. This is a really great way to add some kinesthetic activity in your classroom. I like to set it up so that I actually have clotheslines around my classroom and pin these different images, quotes, or questions to the clothesline, and allow students to circulate for a few minutes and choose one that best reflects their philosophy of teaching and learning with English language. Well, in this case, this is what you all are going to be doing, that best reflects your philosophy of teaching and learning with English learners. So when you select your quote, image, or question, you have to be able to explain why and how it reflects your philosophy. And then you need to share your choice and explanation with someone who was not sitting with you during this webinar. So that means you have to get up, move around. Then when you would all come back together as a group, the expectation is not that you share your own choice and explanation, but rather that you are able to share out your partner's choice and explanation. So that means that you're getting to think deeply about your own philosophy of teaching and learning with English learners, and then you're having to communicate that in your own words to someone else, and listen actively to that person as they share with you, and then be able to summarize and retell what that partner shared with you to the whole group. So lots of good language practice here. We're going to do a short model. I've chosen 4 out of the myriad choices that you all have in the clothesline packet in the Google folder. And here are our choices. 1, tell me and I'll forget. It's a quote, Chinese proverb. Tell me and I'll forget, show me and I may remember, involve me and I'll understand. 2 is a question. How do teachers apprentice students into the practices and language of a discipline or content area? 3 is an image that shows students working on a collaborative graphic organizer. And 4 is another image that has a presumed educator standing at the front of the room in front of the blackboard and just going blah, 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 blah at her students. So I'm going to ask Lily and Andrea which of these items most reflects their philosophy of teaching and learning for English learners. So Andrea, which one did you choose?
Wow, these are great options. So to me, I think image represented underneath or beside number 3 really resonates deeply with me for my philosophy of teaching and learning with English language learners. I love how the students are working collaboratively. I love how there's movement involved and that they're co-creating something together to deepen their content and concept knowledge. And I love the collaboration that's pictured here.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing. Lily, what about you?
Yeah, definitely. I totally agree with Andrea's saying, like, language is not a individual thing, and it involves, interaction, culture, cognition, and the physical movements. So I will choose number 1 because I'm really a constructivist who believes that learning a language, for teachers, you really need to scaffold or support your students from many, many ways. And also you have to create an environment for them to learn. Yep.
Thank you so much.
Yeah, sure.
All right, so now you guys take a few minutes, walk about your clothesline, choose the image or quote or question that most resonates with you, and be prepared to share that with a partner, and then share your partner's choice with the whole group. All right, I'm hoping that clothesline activity was really exciting for you all. This is really marking the end of our 3 moments of lessons here. So I hope you feel like you have a good idea of the components of a lesson in 3 moments from the QTEL model and how you prepare, interact, and extend with your English learners. I did want to mention that although this is, of course, quality teaching for English learning, these practices are for all learners. They're good for all learners.
Absolutely.
You should be doing this in your classroom all the time.
Yeah.
And so on that note, we're going to move to another idea component of teaching and learning. And although, once again, targeted toward teaching and learning with English learners, definitely beneficial across the board. So, Lily Long, we're turning it over to you.
Okay, so I have talked about who I am, and so I'm gonna say something about why I was interested and am still interested in teaching English as English language learners, because previously I taught 10 years in college level business English class, which is really interdisciplinary course, and I found I was really struggling. I was thinking like, should I teach English or should I teach the business part? So that really brought me here today. And also I was frustrating how to motivate my students. That's a big issue in any kind of disciplines. So we're gonna talk about a model called social emotional learning, which is SEL. So this doesn't this is not particularly for English language learners. It also, just like Marie has mentioned, it is board crossing, but for English language learners particularly, this is important because learning a language, speaking a language that people who are not familiar or haven't used in their daily life is really nervous or intensive things for them. So the SEL really helps to deal with those emotional and social emotions. So SEL basically is the process through which children and adults understand and manage emotions, and it sets and achieves positive goals, feels and shows empathy for others, and establishes and maintains positive relationships and makes responsible decisions. So there are a lot of benefits of SEL on students. So according to the meta-analysis research previously, so it leads to students' academic outcomes and improved their classroom behaviors and even their social behaviors, and also it had a positive impact even up to 18 years later on academics. So it's really a long-term impact, and it helps students to deal with their emotional distress and also drug use, and there are more. You can look it up at CASEL, which is the abbreviation of Collaborative for Academic, Social, and Emotional Learning, the organization. So here is the framework that this organization and a lot of researchers in this area developed, which is called the 5 competencies of social emotional learning. So the first one, we call it as self-awareness. So basically it means that students or people, they know their own strengths and the limitations, and they know and they perceive themselves positively instead of negatively. So basically it's a growth mindset instead of fixed mindset. And for the self-management, it refers to that students effectively manage their stress, their emotions, and also they can set or motivate themselves to achieve their goals. And for social awareness, basically it talks about how students they realize the different perspectives of others and also respect others. And this includes like they understand other people from different background or cultural background. Yes. And next one is relational skills, which refers to how students interact and communicate with others, with, as we said, with understanding that people have different perspectives and stances. And last one is making responsible decision making, which really means to make constructive choices and about personal behavior and social interactions based on ethical standards and your safety and social norms. So practically, how do we integrate SEL models in your classrooms? So we have to increase. There are a lot of ways. So these are only some options that you can possibly integrate in your own classrooms. For example, the first one, to increase opportunities for students to do peer connections. For example, we can basically organize students to work together. For example, if you are having the writing activity, then you can ask students to brainstorm with their peers or do the peer edit so that they can learn how to communicate with others and also see people's different perspectives. And next one is circle talk. Students can share their thoughts and the techniques on how to solve a problem and the reviewing a material or learning new terms. And the next one, we say you can give students choice. I think this is really important because this helps students to develop their self-esteem and to show they are valued. So it really leads to the autonomy that we talked a lot today, and also engage students in self-reflection. So this really ties in the cognition that students, you can ask students to give themselves a grade and explain why they have this choice. And also you can also give students, model them how to do the socio-emotional skills, because as a teacher, usually students view us as the the model role in the classroom. So if we can deal with our own emotions or stress, that would be a really good model for students to see how this is valued and how this is going to work for themselves individually. Yeah. So for SEL, you can look at the page from Castle, and the link is already there. So you'll get a lot of ideas, evidence-based and practice-based.
Thank you so much, Lily. One of the things that really struck me about SEL and its connections with QTEL is that it underlying both of these approaches is really this idea that learning takes place through interactions, and that those learning opportunities for students need to be really intentionally scaffolded and structured so that students understand what the expectation is, where they need to be going. So thank you so much, Lily. We hope that you all have enjoyed being here with us today. And if you'd like to contact us, our information is up here. Once again, I'm Marie Hines, a research associate at the Friday Institute. I'm a former middle school and high school English, German, and social studies teacher. So yeah, humanities, but also love STEM, and my colleague beside me.
Yes, I'm Andrea Gambino, a second-year doctoral student at UCLA studying social sciences and comparative education, but I'm also a two-time graduate of NC State University, proudly, and I'm a former public school teacher, English and social studies, grades 6 through 12, both at schools with a heavy focus on STEM. So also STEM is near and dear to my heart.
Thank you all so much for joining in. A list of our references from today's slides. Please check out those if you want to take a deeper dive. And we hope that East West Ed and the New Literacies Collaborative will be coming at you with more wonderful webinars in the future. Have a great day. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.